She pressed a trembling sign to the glass. Kidnapped. The van rattled under a sun that made the world look harmless and small. Every heat-hazed detail sharpened into an ordinary afternoon, and inside that ordinary box of metal a little girl named Maya Hale held a torn flyer like a life raft, letters scratched in a shaking hand and hope folded into a corner. Dust blurred the rear window and the road rolled past in long bands of gold and gray. The smell of old burlap and gasoline pressed at her nose, and each pothole sent a fresh spike of panic through her ribs. Outside, the highway lay empty and indifferent. A slow ribbon of asphalt that had watched 1,000 ordinary lives slide along it and never asked a single question. And for a long, breathless moment Maya wondered if the world had finally learned to look away. Then she lifted the paper again, the marker's ink smudging under the sweat of her fingers, and sunlight picked out the word like a flare. A group of riders parked near the shoulder, a scatter of chrome and leather and weathered faces, glanced up and the world tilted. One of them, Cole Maddox, a man carved of small mercies and older regrets, caught the shape of those letters and felt something inside him snap taut. What followed was not a speech or a plan but a movement, as practiced and inevitable as muscle. Helmets were clasped, boots hit pavement, and engines answered the call with a low, furious chorus. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Loom. Maya remembered her mother telling her once that courage sometimes wore a whisper instead of a roar. She had learned to make that whisper into 2 desperate syllables on a scrap of paper while a stranger's shadow moved in the front seat and the van ate up the distance to nowhere. The man driving, Darren Cole, kept muttering at himself, eyes darting to mirrors with the kind of twitch that said panic had taken the steering wheel long before his hands did. Inside the cramped van, every loose object became an accusation. A stray rubber band, a broken pencil, the promise of somebody's ordinary life turned into evidence that nobody else wanted to see. Maya's small hands ached not just from gripping the sign but from gripping the idea that somebody could still choose to act. Outside, the riders threaded their machines into formation with a silent grammar learned from years of moving as one. Rowan Voss eased left to control the lane, Magnus Reed angled in to box the van toward the gravel, and Beck Rios kept the rear, watching for anything that might break the fragile plan. The sun glanced off chrome like affirmation. The chase did not feel heroic in the movies. There was no rousing music, but it carried the same forward pull. Refusal to let an ordinary wrong remain ordinary as asphalt blurred beneath two-wheeled thunder, memory and motive braided inside Cole's chest. He had not been a hero on any official record. He had been a father once and a man who had learned, through hard living, how to sit with his mistakes. That day, seeing a child's face pressed to a window was a small and terrible mirroring of all the nights he'd walked away when someone needed him. The fear in Maya's eyes was precise enough to cut the doubt he had used as armor for years. He rode harder because he could not bear the weight of failing someone for a second time. The van's driver saw the bikes and made the kind of choices panic invites. Speed, jerking turns, a blind hope that solitude would be an ally. Gravel spat and the vehicle lurched, tires kicking up a pale cloud that turned the afternoon into a sudden theater of motion and dust. Inside, Maya braced herself against every sound. Every engine note felt like a heartbeat aligning with hers. The turning point came on the shoulder where the road thinned and decisions had less room to hide. Cole's bike came up alongside the van, and for a single instant, he looked at the man's eyes and let unflinching fury speak without words. The van overcorrected, the engine screamed, and the world narrowed to the scuff of gravel under boot and the sound of breath released. Magnus was a mountain in motion when he stepped, and Darren, stumbling with the wildness of someone unmoored, found his feet no match for practiced hands. They rested him down in a way that arrested danger without making spectacle of it. Urgency guided every touch so that no harm beyond what was necessary would visit the little girl who had already known too much fear. Maya slid out toward light, sunlight warm and real on her face for the first time that day, and fell into Cole's arms as if gravity itself had recognized that here was what mattered most. His hold was careful and clumsy and human, a shelter built from hands that had done damage and hands that now had to do repair. Around them, the riders gathered in a loose semicircle, a ragged choir of protection, and the plain truth spread through the metal air. Broken people can choose to heal, and sometimes they do it together, when Maya was returned to her mother hours later, the reunion was not a tidy, cinematic moment so much as a slow unspooling of relief where breath came back in uneven gusts and hands refused to let go. The town learned the story in fits and starts, through tears and text messages, and the slow turning of faces at the diner where the riders washed the dust from their machines. Darren was led away by authorities who would ask questions and try to make sense of a darkness that had made him do what he did. The law would take its course, and the community would hold its version of justice in conversations and watchful kindness. For Cole and his riders, the day settled into a softer light. They were not saints, but in the quiet afterward they felt the odd, unfamiliar swell of having chosen to be more than their worst moments. People called them rough men and dangerous on certain days, but in a roadside tableau that would live in the town's memory, the bikers were the reason a whisper became a rescue. The last image is not of sirens or headlines but of hands. Hands of a child, of a mother, of men whose faces had been mapped by storms, meeting and holding. It is the gentle geography of tenderness after terror, the slow work of knitting something sound from what frayed. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment, and tell us where you're watching from so we can appreciate you. In the end, the road keeps going and people keep making choices. Sometimes those choices come wrapped in leather and chrome, sometimes in ordinary neighborliness, but always with the same quiet aim, to answer when a small, brave voice calls. Because kindness always wins.